So my name's Chris Rice. I'm a Trading Standards Officer with Devon, Somerset and Torbay Trading Standards. It says so on the screen here. And the aim of tonight is to get together a group of people, just have a chat with us about how to look after ourselves and help look after people in the farming community. Thanks very much for everybody who's come along. Could I have the next slide, Sam, please? So I've already explained why we're here. I've skipped ahead a slide. Our speakers tonight are Sallie from Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. She's going to talk to us about keeping safe in our home and some of the things that she can do to help us, and the fire service can do. We've got Paul Nolan also from Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue. He's going to talk to us about things we can do to keep our businesses safe and ways that they can help us. We then will move on to speak with Jenny Capp. She's going to speak to us about mental health in general and the effect of the menopause. We then go on to speak with Suzy Deeley, who's a representative of the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution, Rabbi, and she's going to talk to us about the support that's available to people who are struggling. And then we'll finish off our chat this evening with some songs from the Somerset Crooner. One of my colleagues will introduce him a little bit more later on, so we've got a couple of songs from him whilst we're collating any questions. We'll have a question and answer session after those songs, and then he'll play us out with a final song or two before we leave for the evening. So we're very lucky to have him on board as well. So thanks very much to all the speakers. Sam, if you're happy to start off with Sallie's presentations, and then Sallie, it's over to you if you're happy to go.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sallie McKay-Roper, and I work for Devon and Somerset Fire Rescue Service, and I'm based at Bideford. I'm a non-ops, so I'm non-operational, but we do have women firefighters within the service. My main role is working in the community team, and I raise awareness for our free home safety visits, which we give to all the people out in our local communities. So what is a home safety visit? A home safety visit is free, first of all, and I mention that, and I will mention it a couple of times during my presentation, because many people can't believe something's free, but all our service for the home safety visit is completely free. So we will go out and we can come and visit you in your home. We have technicians from the fire service that will be in uniform and have badges, and they will come along and basically give you advice about how to be safe within your home. It can take up to about 45 minutes, depending on how much information that person would like and what we need to give them the advice on. The advice that we give is only advice. We won't tell you off, we won't judge you. We will just come into your home and help you think about a few things that you might not have thought about being safe. So those could be really simple things. For instance, it might be advice on charging things. So for instance, everybody has lots of technology these days. They have laptops, iPads, phones, and you quite often will perhaps charge them at night, or possibly even if you go out. I know when I was in the before I was in the service, I used to charge my mobile phone at night. I'd plug it in at night time, and then I'd get up in the morning. Well, I won't do that anymore now, because I really don't want Bideford coming out to rescue me. They would really tell me off. So the phones and the iPads and the chargers for all these equipment get really hot, and they can catch a light. So please just make sure that you charge them while you're around during the day. Other things that we might look at are things like dishwashers, tumble dryers, washing machines. Again, don't charge them at night, or if you go out during the day, not charge them, sorry, put them on. Just make sure that perhaps you put them on while you're at home. Things like not dishwasher, the tumble dryers, make sure you clean the fluff out. That can be a risk. But it's just looking at those things. It's basically having a fresh set of eyes in your home. That somebody will come in and give you that advice about how to be safe. And then what the technicians will do, we call them technicians, the staff that will go and do the visits, is they will sit down with you and make a plan. And that plan will be a nighttime plan. So thinking about what things you might need to do at night, things you might need to switch off, and how to be safe, closing doors, where your keys are, where you keep your keys, and also to think about an escape route. So you can have every smoke alarm going off in your house, but you might not know what to do. So we'll help you. We'll help you to provide a plan with you of how to get out and what to do in the event of a fire. So that's all the advice that we'll give. And then we can also provide free equipment. So Sam, would you mind please putting the next slide on? Thank you. So all our equipment's free, and you'll see on this slide here that this is all the equipment that we carried on board the vans. So the first one I'm going to talk to you about is the top one, and that's our smoke alarm. So that has a 10-year battery life and it's sealed, so you can't take the battery out, which is good because a lot of people try and do that if their toys run out of battery or the remote control. We will fit these, we'll come in and fit them. You should have a smoke alarm on every level of your home. They should be on the ceiling, and they should be in between perhaps the sitting room, dining room, kitchen downstairs, and then upstairs in between the bedrooms. So just remember, one on every level, on the ceiling. And we ask that they're tested regularly. So if you can test them, once a month is fantastic, but if you can do it once a week, that's gold standard. So they do need to be tested. The next alarm, which is at the top left, you'll see it's got a box and there's a pad and a smoke alarm. So that's for hard of hearing. And that's really important because if somebody's actually can't hear their alarm very well, they need to have a special alarm. So with that alarm, it goes off as normal. It's up on the ceiling. You'll see the smoke alarm on the table there. That will go off, and then it will send a wireless signal to the pad on the far left, which is a hard plastic disc. It's a little bit difficult to see there in that picture, but it's a round hard disc. It goes under that person's pillow, and that will then vibrate, and it will wake the person up in bed. And then you have the box, which is in the middle there, and that will be by the side of the bed, and that will flash. So technically it's for somebody that lives alone. If they don't have anybody to wake them up, nobody next door in their bed to wake them up. However, there are other scenarios. So it might be that their partner might also have hard of hearing issues. So it might not be just somebody that lives alone. It might be the partner might have dementia. They might be a bit scared or worried or not sure what the alarm noise is. Or it might be that that person might sleep on a different level of their home or in a different room. So always when the technicians visit, just make sure that you speak to them and say to them that that would be a different scenario, and that just because you're not living alone doesn't mean to say you can't have one, but obviously speak to the technicians. The other equipment that we provide, so we've then got, going down onto the bottom, you'll see a carbon monoxide alarm. That's next to the blanket on the right hand side. So if you're rural, I live in Bideford and we're not right out in the middle of the country, but a lot more open fires around here, Rayburns, oil burners, gas boilers, anything like that, you should have a carbon monoxide alarm. And the carbon monoxide alarm generally goes on the wall, and it goes on different heights depending on the manufacturer's instructions. Again, you need to test it. And with carbon monoxide, you can't see, smell, or taste it. So you wouldn't know that you were getting carbon monoxide poisoning. But some of the symptoms are things like headaches or feeling fluey or things like that. So very, very important to have that alarm. Then to the right of that, with the green box, is an Energini, and the Energini is an appliance that has an adapter. That adapter is really for somebody to help somebody if they're forgetting to switch something off. So you put your appliance into the adapter, you press the green button at the top, and it will time it for half an hour and then completely switch off. Then the blanket, you might say, well, why would you have a blanket? We can provide lots of equipment for people that smoke. So if people are smoking in bed, obviously we don't really want them doing that, but that's not our decision, it's their home. So we can provide fire retardant bedding for them. And also if they're sitting on a chair and smoking downstairs or upstairs, even if they're in a chair, we can provide throws to go on the chairs, on the back of the chairs, and that blanket's called a lap blanket, would go actually over their lap. We don't really like the block plugs. So I don't know if you've seen this, they're square block plugs, usually white, that you can put lots of plugs into. We're not keen on those. Lots of electricity going into a small area. So we can provide extension leads. We would ask somebody if they could perhaps get an extension lead, but if not, then we would provide one, and we have different lengths of extension leads that we can provide. And then you'll see on the top left, if there's any threat of arson for somebody, well, we get a referral from the police, and we will go out and fit letterbox restrictors. So you can see there, that one just goes on the front of a letterbox. It means the person can lock the letterbox during the day and then open it when the postman arrives to put the letters through. And then last of all, obviously, we've got on it, you'll see in the left hand picture on the bottom, some red sticks with yellow hands. I've brought mine with me here today. So I've got an original one, an older version, which has got a white hand. So these are called smoking testing sticks. And these are really important because it means that somebody can test their alarm. So people with disabilities, particularly, or mobility, or just, you know, a lot older, and maybe we don't really want them climbing up on chairs or stools or ladders to test their alarms. Many people say to me that they use their walking sticks, which, you know, we really don't want, because we don't want them falling over and going into hospital. That would be the last thing we want, especially at the moment. So you can use these to test your alarms. At the moment, like anybody, we are out. Well, not everybody, lots of people aren't out yet, but we are going out doing full visits for the moment. And our technicians are in PP equipment, and they will phone the person beforehand to make sure they're happy for us to still visit. If Sam could just put the slide that was on previously just very quickly for me, please, that would be great. So just to let you know, if you would like a home safety visit, or you know somebody that would like one, please get their permission. You can phone on their behalf as long as you've got the permission, or phone yourselves. And the telephone number to make the call is 0800 05 02 999. And it's a really, really good service. I would really recommend that you phone and get it, especially as it's free. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sally. That's really useful. Thank you. You've actually got some feedback already, actually. Someone just made a comment now. I'm just trying to load it up and see if I can see it. Kerry, one of the local police officers, she's commenting that she had one of the visits several years ago and had extra smoke alarms fitted free of charge, and had a follow call up recently. A very excellent service. So that's great feedback. Thank you, Kerry. Really good. So thank you, Sally. That's really useful.
Thank you.
So now we move on to Paul, who is going to give us a bit more fire safety advice.
Hello everyone, Paul Nolan here. I'm a business safety officer. I'm based in Barnstaple in North Devon. I've predominantly done a presentation tonight on farm fire safety. If anybody's got any specific queries about other businesses and how fire safety can be improved, and obviously, you know, please feel free to email me or get in contact. I think my details will be up later on. Farm fires can be devastating. You know, they can result in the loss of machinery, your stores of hay and straw, livestock, and the destruction of buildings. We attend, you know, hundreds of fires and incidents on farms and small holdings every year. They are particularly high risk from fire, you know, due to a combination of reasons, really. Increased attendance times for us due to the, you know, the isolated locations of farms and poor access routes. We also are hampered often by poor water supplies, so we're having to shuttle water or get bowsers and such like to put fires out. And obviously the large amounts of combustible materials stored in and around farm buildings. If you could put up the next slide, please, that would be great. So what we want to do is just quickly go through sort of how we can reduce the risk of fire happening on your farm. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that a farm is treated as a business and as a workplace, and therefore they are actually covered by the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order, which is the main piece of primary legislation, fire safety legislation in England and Wales. And basically farm owners and farm managers are generally seen as under the order as being the responsible person, and with whom the duty resides with them to make sure that there's adequate fire safety provisions are in place. So it is something that you should do. You should look at your farm and consider the safety provisions you have there. Ideally, what we would like you to do is carry out what's called a fire safety risk assessment, which would help you identify the risks that can be removed or reduced, and decide the nature of what general fire precautions you need to protect your people that work on the farm and the buildings and the machinery, livestock, etc. Could we put the next slide up, please? So these are just sort of basic sort of top tips, really. Oh, we've gone, there we go. So basically, making sure that machinery is regularly serviced and maintained, making sure that the machinery is kept clean, kept free from hay, straw, oil and grease. If possible, consider keeping any machinery away from hay and straw, and trying maybe to store those machines away from the building or in a separate building wherever possible. One issue that has come up quite a lot is when hot works are being carried out. We've had several barn fires where there's been a fire caused from welding, or in particular one that comes to mind is one where a fire started from grinding work done on a back axle of a trailer. These hot works were being carried out in a building full of combustible materials, hay and straw, and basically the sparks ignited that, and the whole buildings of full of hay and straw have gone up. Wherever possible, if you've got any hazardous materials, ideally we'd like those stored away from anything combustible like hay and straw. So if you've got buildings containing fuels or chemicals and anything like that, if you can store those away from highly combustible items, and then ideally away and separate from any buildings housing livestock as well, that would be fantastic. The other issue as well is actually storing hay and straw. What we'd like you to do is ideally don't go from floor right to ceiling. What we found is that stacks are going right to the roof, to the top of the roof, and they're becoming in contact with with the roof lighting, and that's caused fires in the past as well. And then obviously making sure when we are bringing hay and straw in from the fields, ideally it needs to be dry before storing to prevent spontaneous combustion. We get many fires are caused by storing damp or wet hay, which then start to heat up and eventually will self-ignite. That is a real issue. Another issue which is causing a lot of fires is poor condition of electrical systems in buildings. You do really need to carry out regular electrical safety checks. Look at the state of any wiring, any lighting, you know, any sockets. Often you'll find, you know, that it gets damaged over time, and so that does cause a lot of fires as well. Obviously, when you know, another tip really is, if you've got buildings with livestock in, make sure that you and your family and your workers have got you know, an evacuation plan for your livestock in the event of fire. You know how you would get them out. And another tip really that we would ask, make sure that the entrance to your farm is clearly signposted and displayed, so that we can find you, and make sure that we've got, you know, as good access as possible to your farm and to any buildings on the farm. Could we have the next slide, please? That's just a picture basically of the kind of scenario that we come across, what we're met with basically. If I can show you the next slide, please. This is just some pictures and a brief case study of a typical farm. This particular farm was located in West Somerset, on the edge of Exmoor. It's basically what can happen when something goes spectacularly wrong. It was in a remote location, again, where it was very poor water supplies, and lots of combustible material in all these buildings. In fact, it's difficult to see from these pictures, but attached to one of these buildings is actually the farmhouse as well, and we had a hell of a job to stop the fire spreading from building to building and then actually affecting the farmhouse. But we did manage to do that, but everything else was lost. I don't know if you can see from one of the pictures here, the actual fire started. I'm trying to go. Is it possible to go back a slide, please? There is a picture here on one of the slides where you can actually just make out a tractor parked at the side of the building. Now, when it was finally when we were able to finally examine the buildings and try and determine the cause of the fire actually started in the, you know, from the tractor itself, and it actually spread to the buildings. So it basically then spread the building. As I said, it was difficult. It was a difficult location to get to. We were having to shuttle water from quite a distance away. And you'll see, if we can keep going with the slides, please. And again, please. This is just more pictures of what it looked like. There's the tractor on the right-hand side. You might just make it out. That's where the fire started, and this is what was left, unfortunately. People clearing up all the mess afterwards. There was asbestos on the farm as well, which made the clear up even worse. This is some of the repairs that had to be done afterwards as well. Now this basically, afterwards we spoke to the farmer and his loss adjuster, and this is the kind of costs that can be involved with a farm fire. As we said here, the cost of the rebuilding of all the buildings that were lost, £750,000. The cost of cleaning, decontamination. As I said, there was asbestos present in some of the buildings and on the roofs. There was £50,000 worth of cost there. Loss of all of stock and equipment that were in and around the buildings, £150,000. The disruption to the farmer's business. I mean, how do you put a cost on that? I wouldn't even like to think. The actual farm concern, he had to rent additional buildings, which was another 10,000, and then obviously an insurance excess of 50,000. So when you look at it in the whole, you're talking about overall losses and costs of £1 million plus. So it just shows how quickly something can escalate and cost you a lot of money. And you know, for some businesses, they don't recover from this sort of thing. So just taking some precautions and just being mindful of risks of fire on your farm could pay dividends, really. Could I have the next slide, please? This is just a few other issues that have come to light in recent years. How fires have started. A lot of farms now are getting biomass boilers fitted, and we've had instances where cleaning out the biomass boilers, the debris fallen out, or embers have caused ignition of combustibles, because often in these, you know, in the building where the biomass boiler is housed, often, you know, it could be a barn, there's often other stuff in there as well, equipment and machinery. So we've had debris coming out from the boiler, or falling out, or piles of debris sort of self-igniting as well, and then spreading to other combustible material in the building. The infrared lamp, this was quite a sad fire. It was an infrared lamp that was being used to keep some lambs warm. It wasn't secured very well. It blew over in the wind, ignited the straw that was in the building, and basically there was a lot of livestock that was actually killed in that. There was lambs, pigs, and even the farmer's daughter's pony was in that building as well, and sadly that died as well. And then, as I said, we've got the storage of hay, which is often an issue as well. We've, you know, with the way bales are stored too close to light fittings, too close to other sources of ignition, and we've got also the issue of wet bales being stored, which are heating up and self-igniting. And can I have another slide, please? Make sure everybody knows what to do in the event of fire. Always carry a mobile phone with you. If you are going to have things like carry out sort of hot works, welding or grinding, it's a good idea to have an extinguisher nearby. So make sure you've got an extinguisher and they're in good working order. As I said, make sure you've got an animal evacuation plan in place. Make sure you know how you get those animals out. Silly things like making sure you've got buckets near water troughs. You might be able to, you might be unlucky enough to have a fire, but if you've got something there that you can quickly deal with it, then great. You know, as I said, make sure that we can find you. Make sure that your farm is well signposted, and wherever possible, we can get decent access in and around your farm. And if possible, if you know where your nearest fire hydrant is, we do have them on a map on our system in our vehicles. But if you do know where your nearest hydrant is, perhaps you could just keep an eye on it and make sure that it's visible and it's kept clear of any undergrowth, so that, you know, if we did sadly have to come and use it, we can get to it and it's usable. It just saves time for us, you know. Could I have the next slide, please? Unfortunately, arson is an issue, and it is responsible for a number of fires. All we would ask is, wherever possible, maintain a decent standard of security wherever possible. Lock sheds and buildings, particularly those which house fuel and chemical stores. Install some intruder sensors, security lighting. I would say, PIR lighting, infrared lighting is a good deterrent. Keep your fences and gates in good condition. Try and dispose of rubbish regularly to avoid a build-up of material that could burn. So rather than just sort of letting it build up, where someone could come along and throw a match at it, try and get rid of your rubbish as regularly as you can. And then finally, wherever possible, if you've got a dog or a goose or or both, even better. So could I have the next slide, please? So really, just to take away from this is to look at your farm and carry out this fire risk assessment. Look at your sources of ignition on the farm, welding, grinding, damp hay or straw, naked flames, people smoking, poorly serviced, poorly maintained electrics or vehicles. Look at the sources of fuel. So that would be your petrol tanks, your diesel tanks, LPG tanks, hay, straw. What dangerous substances have you got on the farm? Chemicals, fertilizers, things like that. So that's your identifying your hazards. Who are the people at risk? Well, it's going to be yourselves, it's going to be your family, it's going to be any farm workers or contractors and any visitors. And then look at that, look at your risk assessment, look at your farm and go, right, where could a fire start? Well, it could start in that building, or it could start there. It could, and then start to see if you can remove or reduce the fire hazards, or reduce or remove the risks of a fire starting. So by sort of taking some steps about where you store things and machinery and maintaining electrics, and just being mindful of that, then hopefully you will reduce the risk greatly of a fire actually happening on your farm. And what I would say about carrying out a fire risk assessment, and it doesn't need to be War and Peace, it just needs to be a simple sort of holistic look at your farm. You know your farms better than we do. Where everything's kept, and what the access is like, what the water supplies are like, so you're the best placed person to consider what the risk of fire is and how badly it would affect you and your business. And what I would say is carry out that fire risk assessment, and if wherever possible, jot down what your findings are, because what I would say is that insurance companies are more and more looking at businesses and saying, when they've had a fire, they're going to turn around and say, well, where's your fire risk assessment? Show what you did to, what due diligence did you carry out to reduce or remove the risk of fire? So what I would do is I would always recommend to people to carry out a fire risk assessment. And then, if you are unlucky enough to have an accidental fire, but you can show that due diligence and you've shown that you've taken all the steps possible to reduce or remove the risk of fire, then you're not going to give that insurance company any wriggle room. They're going to go, okay, fair enough, you did everything you can. It was just one of those unfortunate incidents, but we accept it was a pure accident and you couldn't have done anything more. So I would strongly recommend that you try and carry out that risk assessment. And the next slide, please. There is some other information that we can send to you, particularly if you've got any sort of bed and breakfast or letting accommodation, holiday lets or something like that on your farms, because again, there are fire precautions that need to be in place for people who are paying guests and are sleeping. Again, then we're looking at things like there should be smoke detection and such things like that. So there is information there out there for you on that as well, and we can send anyone who wants any information, we can send some things to them. But there is a lot of information on our website as well, which is www.dsfire.gov.uk. And next slide, please. And that's the end of my presentation. As I said, if anybody has any particular things they want to discuss or ask, quite happy to take questions, or alternatively, I think the organisers of this have got my email address, and they can send anything on to me and I'll respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was really interesting and some real points to take on board. So thank you very much for taking the time to come to speak to us. There are a few questions that have come through on the chat as you've been speaking, and a few comments as well, commending the work you're doing. So the first question we've got on here is, do you offer a similar sort of service to business to kind of educate them? We do a bit of work about, we walk around farms and give them advice. Do you do that sort of visit to them and tell them areas they can improve?
What we have done in the past is farms are a little bit of a bit of a strange sort of entity, really, because not only are they places of business, they're normally people's sort of personal sort of dwelling as well. So farms have always been treated slightly differently, but they are places of work and they do fall under the fire safety order. What we have done in the past is that we've tried to do some education events with the NFU, and we've done sort of like this sort of presentation to sort of, sort of groups of farmers basically who've come along, and we've done that. But we, if there are people who have got specific issues on their own farms and they want to discuss, or whether they, we can't do the fire risk assessment for them. I need to make that clear. That would need to be done by the farmers themselves, or by a competent fire risk assessor. We can't do it for them, but we can certainly offer advice and guidance. As I said, the farmers themselves, they're their best place to look at they know their farms, they know their buildings, they know the layout of the farm, and they're the best place to know where the risks are and what they can do to make it safer.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And then we've also got another comment on which Sally has helped with some of those points about there being template. Apologies, I'm trying to read and speak at the same time and it doesn't work. There's from the NFU. Possibly, and then Sally's also mentioned that if you're concerned about a premises, you can refer on your website. Also, Linda's put on a.
Chris, can I just say that that's where with the farmers, like Paul said, for the home safety visits, as I said, you can refer on the website, but that would be an angle or an avenue for a farmer and actually visit them in their home and see how, if they wanted to have a visit.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Another point that Linda's commented in the chat about her own personal experience of a farm fire and the devastation it caused there. And kind of reinforcing what the importance of everything being tidy and things like that. So thanks for commenting, Linda. It's really good to see, what Paul's saying and how it will be practically and how useful it is. So thank you very much. If you have any other queries for Sally or for Paul later in the meeting, please feel free to comment in here or send me an email. Those of you that are on here would have received an email from me earlier today giving you the sign-in details to this meeting. Please feel free to respond to that with any questions you've got for any of the speakers, and I can either point you in the right direction, but please get in touch with us. But thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, Sally. I appreciate you. You're both really busy people, so you may need to shoot off to do other things. But thanks very much for giving up your time this evening, and I'll speak to you again at another time.
Thank you. Cheerio.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you very much. So now we move on to Jenny, who's going to talk to us a bit about the menopause and some general mental health tips and resources that we can use. So Jenny, are you happy to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to speak. My name's Jenny, and I'm a GP, but I actually work in A&E in Taunton as a GP there, although currently not working due to imminently, well, hopefully giving birth in a couple of weeks. Essentially, also I'm a farmer's wife, so I think I've got quite a good insight into the stresses and strains of farming life. I was actually, my initial presentation about menopause was initially originated from a talk that I was asked to give for the Women in Farming group up on Exmoor, because that's where we farm. Certainly I think even the men in this group, because I appreciate this is, targeted at women, but actually it's really important to know what your partner's relatives are going through, because I think menopause is still quite a taboo subject and not really talked about, and that's why I was asked to give that talk to the Women in Farming group. And then clearly this is a mental health evening as well, and so especially with the year we've had and farming being such a often an isolating job as well, it's really important to kind of be able to look after our own mental health and be aware of others and be able to kind of look out for any possible problems that might be lying ahead for ourselves or others. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So we're just going to cover, I will try and be as brief as possible. So we're just going to talk about the menopause and when it occurs, what the normal symptoms are and what treatments are available. I'm doing this as a very brief overview, and so obviously it's better to look at all the treatments available, discuss it with your GP. I have got some resources at the end, online resources that people can look at, and also, as I say, just some tips to help mental health and signposting to resources, again, mostly online. So if I could go next slide, please. So menopause, essentially, it's the loss of periods, but the symptoms actually start months to years before your period's stopping, and we call this the perimenopause. And often you'll have irregular periods and you'll have the symptoms, which we'll go on to in a little while. And so the treatments are actually more geared towards symptom control. And it's because the ovaries are no longer producing eggs, so you lose that activity there. And the average age of actually going through the menopause is 51. Now, but as I mentioned, these symptoms can start much earlier, so maybe mid-40s, and actually some people go through premature menopause, which is under the age of 40. So it can affect people, you think of it as often people think of it as an older, symptoms would be coming on older, but actually people in their 40s very much get symptoms. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the symptoms, most people have probably heard about hot flushes and night sweats, and 3/4 of people will report these. But actually, talking about mental health today, it actually has a huge impact on our mental health. And so people can report mood swings, anxiety, low mood, and so it really can affect how they perform in work and in relationships and friendships and things like that. There's also physical symptoms as well as the hot flushes. It dries everything out, so dry skin, dry hair. Often people say their hair gets thinner. There's also a loss of libido, and you can have vaginal symptoms as well. Poor concentration, so again affecting work and life very much. Palpitations, so sensation of your heart racing. Insomnia, so that can be for multiple reasons, so not feeling like you can sleep very well due to the hot flushes and night sweats, but also the anxiety and low mood as well. And also associated with the symptoms, you get urinary symptoms, so you might go more frequently to the toilet, or you might have incontinence symptoms as well. So you can see that it's a wide range of symptoms and really can affect people in a lot of different ways. So next slide, please. So as I say, I'm going to whistle through these because we haven't got much time, but essentially there are things you can do without going to see your GP, because as I say, it is often a taboo subject. I'm very passionate that it shouldn't be, that we should actually be talking about women's health and employers should know about it because it can affect people in all different ways. If you imagine, if you're not sleeping well because of hot flushes, it's going to affect your how you perform in work as well. So lifestyle measures, these are things you can just do and make sure you're keeping healthy, really good for your mental health as well. So taking regular exercise, obviously being farmers, usually we're doing a lot of that, but also avoiding things like smoking, alcohol and caffeine, because they can worsen the symptoms and they're not going to be helping our overall health as well. I've written there set sleep hygiene. What that means is actually having a routine about going to bed. So kind of winding down at the end of the day, putting away your phone, trying to shut out any stresses. I know that's easier said than done, but really having a way of winding down in the evening and having a little routine. So maybe having a hot drink, having a bath or whatever, and just really trying to put yourself into that routine of having a good night's sleep. And diet, I mean, we should be eating low saturated fat and salt to reduce our blood pressures, and also for bone health, because when we've gone through the menopause as well, our bones become weaker, and so having a diet rich in calcium and vitamin D helps that. Next slide, please. So hot flushes, these are really horrible for the people having them, and so there are things you can do without medications, such as wearing kind of cotton, using fans, sleeping in cooler rooms, if you've got windows you can open, etc. Often people will say there's triggers to their hot flushes, so it might be caffeine, it might be stress, and trying to avoid those triggers can help the hot flushes as well. But there are medications that can help, as well as hormone replacement therapy that I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. There's also antidepressants have been shown to help, and clonidine, which is another medication. Again, I'm not going into these in big detail. The low mood associated with menopause, antidepressants can be used, but actually the first line treatment would be more CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's all looking at how you think about things and trying to change the way you think about that. And it has been shown in the evidence that CBT does help the low mood associated with menopause. The other thing is self-help groups. So obviously being around people, discussing how you're feeling with other people who are going through the similar symptoms, because it can feel quite lonely. And I think certainly as farmers or farmers' wives, or in the rural community, especially this year with not having as much social contact, being able to be part of a group and discuss things. Certainly we found it very helpful to have a discussion on our Women in Farming group, which we did via Zoom. But again, and general self-help groups, doesn't have to be specific to farming, obviously. So next slide, please. I talked about vaginal dryness, and there are moisturizers that can be used, and also topical estrogens. Now, these can even be used if you can't take HRT, so hormone replacement therapy, orally or in other ways, because if you've got risk factors, you can still have it vaginally. But again, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail with that, but there are things available, and that would help that often helps with the urinary symptoms as well. Going on to alternative or complementary therapies, there really has to be quite a bit of caution about this, because you don't know what you're getting, because obviously it's not being produced in the same way as medications, Western medications are. So the quality, purity, and what's in them may be unknown. But the guidance does say that black cohosh and isoflavones may help with hot flushes, but as I say, the safety is unknown. So, but you might have heard about those through kind of health food shops and things like that. And acupuncture. Now, acupuncture doesn't have any side effects, and is very good complementary therapy. Although I don't believe it's available on the NHS for menopause symptoms, therefore it'd be going privately. And all treatments would be reviewed 3 months after starting to see whether how you're getting on with them, really. Next slide, please. So going on to HRT, and I will try and be as brief as possible, but essentially what you're doing is replacing that estrogen. So your ovaries aren't working, you're not getting that estrogen from them. And so we're replacing that, and to get rid of the symptoms essentially. So that can be systemically, so affecting the whole body. So you might ingest it, or you might have it in patches, or as I mentioned before, vaginally just for those symptoms. But having a vaginal estrogen wouldn't affect like hot flushes and things like that. But there are lots of different formulations, so there's lots of different ones to try. If you don't get on with one, you can get on, you might find another one works for you. So there's gels, tablets, patches. But if you haven't had a hysterectomy, so if you've still got a uterus, you must not just take estrogen on its own. So there must be a form of progesterone. Now that can be in different ways. So that might be in a combined pill, or it might be that you have progesterone in a different form. So people might have heard of the Mirena coil, that's got progesterone in it. You would always have an annual review with HRT, and it's about, I will say this later on, but it's about having the lowest dose possible for the shortest amount of time possible. Okay, so next slide, please. So benefits, mainly it's the treatment of menopausal symptoms. It's the most effective treatment because you're replacing that estrogen that your body's missing, especially for hot flushes. It also is going to improve your bone health, so prevent osteoporosis, and therefore reduce your risk of having fractures. So we don't want anyone tripping over, getting fractured hips or anything like that. And also in certain age groups, it's shown to provide protection from heart disease. But if we go on to the next slide, you'll see that also there's risks with it as well. And one of those is cardiovascular disease. Now, you kind of wonder how can that be on both slides? But so if you start HRT over 60, then, which we wouldn't recommend, it can increase your risk of stroke. So essentially, the risk if you start it in your 40s, when the symptoms start 40s, 50s, it's much lower. Whereas we wouldn't recommend starting it over 60. But all of these risks and benefits would be discussed with your GP before you started it. Now, breast cancer, there's been a lot in the news about risk of breast cancer and HRT, and that's very much on an individual basis. Clearly, if you have a family history of breast cancer, which is hormone related, then it wouldn't be advised to have it. So the genetics have a huge influence, but so do lifestyle factors. So it has been shown that smoking and having a poor diet or obesity actually increase your risk of breast cancer more than HRT would. So it's about every person balancing the risks and benefits specific to them. And the same with DVT, so deep vein thrombosis, clots in the leg. That also depends on the type of HRT. So if you have it with a patch, it's been shown not to increase your risk. But if you have it via tablet, it may increase your risk. But again, genetics and lifestyle factors play into that as well. And as I mentioned, age is a big thing. So when you discuss this with your GP, if it was something you wanted to try, the risks increase with increasing age. So although you might start it younger, and every year you discuss it and say, yeah, I'm happy with the risk versus benefits, it's not to say you can't have it carrying on over 60, but it's about discussing the risks and the benefits. And if you can go on to the next one, please. So just a little summary of HRT. So, sorry, very wordy slide, but essentially short-term treatment of symptoms of menopause, benefits of treatment are considered to outweigh the risks. And as I mentioned before, the lowest effective dose should be taken, and it depends on what you're using it for. So clearly, if you were had a premature menopause and needed the estrogen because you haven't gone through that age of the natural, so we said 51 is the kind of average age of the menopause. If you went through the menopause at 40, you've got that 10-11 years where you're not protecting your bone health. So usually people would take HRT in that time. As I mentioned before, you should be reassessed annually, so every year. And yeah, so for some women, actually, they use it long term because they're happy with the risks for them. They weigh up the risks and the benefits, and they want to continue it because it's how they get their quality of life. And so if they start HRT around the time of the menopause, the risk is very small, but there's only limited data in studies for continued usage beyond the age of 60. And as I mentioned, we don't normally start it over 60 because the risks are increased. But it doesn't mean that if you started it earlier in your 40s, 50s, you have to stop it on reaching 60. Okay, next slide, please. And just a little slide just to say not to ignore. So any bleeding after your periods have stopped. There are lots of causes of this. So HRT itself can cause you to have some bleeding if you're still having periods. So actually this bleeding could be a period. It could be a vaginal cause, but we always would say you need to discuss it with your GP, as it also is a sign of endometrial. So the endometrium is the lining of the womb. And so we need to make sure that it's not that. We'd also say you should see your GP if your cycle changes. So if you get heavier bleeding between periods. So if in doubt, get checked out. And it's very, very important to keep up to date with breast and cervical screening. So breast screening every 5 years, and that's from every 3 years from the age of 50 to 71, and cervical screening every 3 years initially from the age of 25, and then it goes down to every 5 years from the age of 50. And last point, don't forget contraception. So HRT is not a contraceptive, and you can obviously still get pregnant up until you have gone through the menopause. So that is something always to think about. Okay, next slide, please. So there's just some resources on some websites about a bit more in-depth information, because I appreciate I have just rattled through that because I haven't had much time to cover such a huge topic. So there are loads and loads of resources out there. The NHS website is always a good place to start to have information that is accurate, and you know what you're getting. But if you worried about any of your symptoms or wanted to talk about it more, your GP would be able to discuss that with you. And I think what I also wanted to say is that GPs are open. I think there's a lot of with COVID, people are feeling that maybe GPs are closed, but they've just had to change to a different way of working. So all GPs are open. They just might triage everybody before then seeing people face to face if they need it. So next slide, please. So after that whistle-stop tour of menopause, I just wanted to, because this is a mental health evening, just wanted to signpost and, well, give you a couple of tips and then signpost to some resources on mental health as well. Obviously, farming, we know from the stats and that it is, unfortunately, has a lot of people who struggle with their mental health for many, many reasons. You've got the isolation, especially this year, although actually I suppose it's much the same. I know when we were lambing in April during lockdown, it was exactly the same as the April before, apart from nice weather. But it is really isolating, and I think there are lots of stresses. You've got things like TB, financial worries, succession planning, worries about physical health. And then we've had COVID, Brexit, the uncertainty of that, what's going to happen in January, looking at, market prices. Obviously, at the moment, things are good, but we don't know what's going to happen from January. So all of these have a risk to our mental health and well-being, and those of people around us. So I think it's just really important to look out for our own mental health and well-being and those of others. And so I've just got some ways of helping and signposting to some local and national resources. So yeah, next slide, please. So some tips to look after yourself. Essentially look for symptoms that your mental health needs attention. So things like your mood dipping, being a bit irritable, are you snapping at your partner or your children more? Have you got poor sleep, poor concentration, feeling useless, worthless? Are you having relationship problems? Have you had a change in your appetite? Are you feeling anxious or worried? And all of these, just have a think, actually, is this a reaction to something around me? Is it, something happened, or is this something that I need to really worry about and actually need some help about? And what I would say is talk. So the most important thing is it is right that a problem shared is a problem halved. Talk to your friends and family. Or if you don't feel that, because I know, it's difficult sometimes to discuss business, if there's a business problem or whatever, there are independent people who don't have to, you don't have to talk to your friends and family, although I would recommend it. Speak to your GP, speak to a counsellor. There are helplines. So the Farming Community Network has a helpline that's open every day of the year, and I've got the number later on. So staying in touch with your friends and family, and that's been increasingly difficult this year with COVID, but having those connections and being able to, even if it's online, just really being careful about making sure you stay in touch and that you've got that support network around you. And I think certainly that's what we've really found with the Women in Farming group, that we've been able to carry on having our Zoom meetings. Has just been really lovely. Excuse me. So sleep, we talked about sleep hygiene before, so I won't go through that. And mindfulness, so this is about kind of taking a moment for yourself every day and just kind of how you feel about things. And there's a very good website that's actually to do with farming called Focused Farmer, and it's a free video series, and I've got a link to that later on. And we talked a little bit earlier about the importance of looking after your health, so eating healthily, cutting down on smoking and alcohol. And you can self-refer to, it's called Talking Therapies in Somerset, where I work, or TalkWorks is the equivalent in Devon, it seems. And these are kind of, they could signpost you to self-help resources, you'll have a phone consultation to discuss how you're feeling, and then they might advise you to go through a series of treatments. That might be the cognitive behavioral therapy that we talked about earlier, or some mindfulness or online resources to work through. So there are lots of things out there. So if I could go next slide, please. Fantastic. So tips to help others. So looking out for others. I think because it's, farming is such an isolating career, it is really important to notice any changes. So if someone's acting differently, they're not as sociable, they might be more irritable, they haven't replied to your messages when they normally would. Obviously, no one's going out to the pub, so it's tricky to know, that's usually when you'd have that wind down at the end of the day. But have you noticed they've got low mood, poor sleep? Are they drinking excessively? Are they not looking after themselves? They look quite disheveled. And I think the main thing is to actually ask them how they're feeling, because you'd be surprised how many people actually just need that first nudge. And don't be worried that talking to someone about how they feel, because it will never make things worse. It's not going to change their mood. It's actually going to be a good thing to just say, look, how are you feeling today? You just seem a little bit off, etc. And that might be all they need, that they just want an ear to talk to and say, actually, you know what, things are really difficult at the moment. And there are ways that we can help as well. So there's practical support, and I know we've got a lady from RABI, which is the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution, and so if it's financial support they need or practical support, that's really, really helpful, and I'm sure she's going to talk to us about that. There's helplines, like I talked about, farming specific ones like Farming Community Network, but also national ones. So you've got the Samaritans and things like that as well. You've got your GP that you could suggest they have a chat to, and also self-referring to those resources like Talking Therapies or TalkWorks. And as I mentioned, actually being a friendly, non-judgmental ear can be the biggest help for these situations. And if you just next slide. And these are the resources I've talked about, some of them on there. So there's some really good resources, some farming related, and then the Talking Therapies and the TalkWorks ones at the end. There is also that Farming Community Network helpline. So they are absolutely brilliant charity. And so I'd recommend, if anyone has, to have a look at their website as well. And the mindfulness website is that focusedfarmers.com. And I think that is me done in a half an hour whistle-stop tour through those subjects. So sorry I've talked so quickly. It's a lot to cover in half an hour. And if anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Jenny, thank you very much. Like you say, it's a very quick tour, but the information in there is so valuable. Thank you very much. There are a few comments in the chat here, which if you don't mind me passing on, and maybe you might be able to comment on. First of all, are there any support groups locally in Devon and Somerset for perimenopause and menopause? Is that anything you're aware of? Maybe in Somerset, I suppose Devon is not really your local area, but is there anything in Somerset that people can rely on?
Do you know, it's not something that I'm aware of, actually, and I think certainly those symptoms, the first port of call, I'd actually go and see your GP and have a chat to them. But support groups, from that point of view, I think would be incredibly useful. But I don't know of any off the top of my head, I'm afraid. It might be worth looking at the website resources I mentioned, because they might have local support groups available, but there's none that I know of, I'm afraid. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Linda's left us a comment asking whether your presentation might be available to share with some young farmers, because it might be quite relevant for them for things that their mothers might be experiencing. So would you be happy with me sharing your presentation with other people? If they would send me an email and ask for it, are you happy with me sending that on to other people?
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, especially with all the resources that are on there, obviously, because this, it's such a quick, so like an overview this evening. I know when I did the menopause one for the Women in Farming group, it was 2 hours of discussion. So, and that was even with the mental health. So absolutely feel free to share away, no problem.
That's fantastic. Also we've got Ellie has commented about the availability of similar things to TalkWorks and the Somerset equivalent in Dorset as well, which is helpful. Obviously we're aiming things at Devon and Somerset, which tends to be our patch, but having that Dorset contact is really useful as well, because quite a lot of the Devon farms and Somerset farms are right on the border with Dorset. So thank you, Ellie, for to bringing that to our attention there. And just for the purposes of people listening to it on the recording, the Dorset version is called Steps to Wellbeing. It's a talking therapy service, and you can either speak to your GP and ask them to refer you, or you can refer yourself on, and the phone number on here is 0300 790 6828. That's 0300 790 6828. So unless anybody has anything they'd like to discuss now, I think maybe we can move on and speak to Suzy with her presentation. Suzy, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Thank you very much.
Over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. It's a great opportunity for us to talk to you a bit about RABI. I'm hoping that many of you will know who we are and what we do, but hopefully I can give you a bit of an update as well on the work that we currently do, but also where we're going. Can I have the next slide, please? So Jenny actually alluded to some of this already. Farming is a fantastic industry, but it's not easy. It's never been easy, but it's getting more and more complex. There are a lot of challenges facing farming people at the moment. Last autumn and winter was incredibly wet, then it was incredibly dry. That led to very poor harvests, and it was also very difficult for livestock farmers. There are increasing financial pressures. There is Brexit hanging over us. There is a lot of uncertainty over policy and trade deals, and that was even before COVID. It's an industry which has so many challenges, and obviously isolation forms a big part of this, and we have a real issue and higher than average levels of stress and depression, anxiety and suicide. And this is something we can't continue to ignore. We really, really need to put a spotlight on this, and to talk more about it, and to make talking about mental well-being much more commonplace. Can I have the next slide, please? So who are RABI? We're our national farming charity. We work across England and Wales. We've been around since 1860. Traditionally known for the work we still carry on very much. The core of our work is providing practical care and financial grants to farmers, farm workers and their dependents. We have we've been known for many years as helping traditionally the retired or those who've exited the industry, providing one-off grants or quarterly grants, but we're also helping more and more with working farming families. We support their domestic situations rather than the farm businesses, but we can help in many, many different ways. We will continue to carry on with this work, but actually we are looking at the work that we do currently and looking at the whole of the farming community. And as we said, that they're facing a lot of complex challenges and there is more support needed. We recognise that, and we're looking at the moment. We've got a very ambitious plans to evolve our services, but it's one step at a time. So the first thing we are doing, next slide please. The first thing that we're doing is we launched on the 19th of October an online wellbeing community. So we have partnered with specialists, a specialist provider who are lead provider to the NHS, for example. They have many, many years of experience in providing this support. So it's essentially two websites, one younger audience, 11 to 17-year-olds, called Couth, and also an adult site called Quell. Now, for the farming community, these are completely free to access. Through the easiest way is probably through our website. You go on there, it's completely anonymous, as I said, and also free. There is a simple registration process, and that takes you through to either the adult or the youth site. When you get on there, there is reams and reams of content on there. But what we have done in partnering with Couth and Quell is to put a farmer-friendly focus on this. So there is farming related content as well as all the general content. And the sites are backed also by professional counsellors who are BACP trained and accredited. On the site, there's reams and reams of contents. There's magazine articles, there are forums that people can interact with, but there's also the ability to either chat online with counsellors or to make one-to-one counselling sessions. And we very much see this as an addition to the basket of support available out there. And behind that, behind the site, the counsellors have been trained by ourselves and with IAXA also in farming terminology, the key pressures, the organisations out there, so that people, the counsellors can really understand the times of year, the sectors, the different farming, what those pressures might be. And they also have signposting information also, so that they can signpost on to the likes of ourselves, and FCN has also been mentioned, so it might be that people get signposted also onto FCN. We see this as I said, as adding to the basket of support available. It might be that someone just browses very quickly through. It might be that it's something that they can keep going back to and looking at, having different interactions as they go through the site. The site, as I said, is backed by professional counsellors, and there is a lot of safeguarding built into it. As a user, it's completely unobtrusive, but what will happen is that as a user goes through the site, if some of their behaviours look concerning, there is a traffic light system used by the counsellors so that they can actually interact with those with the individuals on the site, perhaps point them to the information that they're looking for, or equally to divert them into some of those counselling sessions. So we're really excited about this this new platform. We hope it really adds to the basket support. It might be for some people that they're in early stages, that they have poor mental well-being, but actually this gives them access to the information they need, and they can help refer on. It might be that actually this is something that they have whilst they're waiting to get one-to-one counselling. We really don't mind how it's used. We just want it to be a useful resource for people. Have the next slide, please. So as I said, this is the start of our journey, and we are looking to evolve our services, but actually, what does the problem look like out there? There are, we all know that there are issues with mental well-being. We know that farmers are facing so many difficulties. But if we are looking to evolve our services to better meet the needs of the farming community, and as are many of the support agencies, we work very closely with all the other farming organisations out there. And we will continue to do so. This is not about us becoming really a huge charity. This is about us hoping to really better meet the needs and to work better and smarter with the other organisations that are out there. So we are very excited to have commissioned the largest ever research project looking into farmer wellbeing. And when we talk about wellbeing, we're talking about physical wellbeing, we're talking about mental wellbeing, and also how that's linked to your farm businesses. So we have commissioned the University of Exeter. This will be going live in January, and we're working with some really key partners also, and we will be working with the whole industry to try and get this out there everywhere. What we really need is farmers and their families. So we're looking at farmers, farm workers, we're looking at their wives and their adult children also, because we want a broad spectrum information and data gathering about what the problems look like, what people are concerned about, what the key pressures are, so that we can start to look to evolve our services. This will be mailed out to many thousands. It will also be in the farming press. We are having support from NFU, and we're building also our support networks out there at the moment. It will also be available online. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to fill in, and it takes about 15 minutes. It's not a very onerous task, but we are very excited to be launching it. It will, as I said, go live in January, and we hope to have the results to publish in the autumn. This is certainly, it's being commissioned by RABI, but we are looking for the results will be available to the whole farming community, because this is about all of us working together to really support better the farming community, to look at what their needs are and to evolve our services to better meet them. Can I have the next slide, please? So we need your help. We all know that there are real problems with low and poor mental well-being out there, and also many challenges faced by the industry at the moment, and we need to talk about them. We can provide all the stats and the data in the world, and we will have much more of it after the research, which will be brilliant. But what we really need is people to be talking about this, to share their stories, to encourage others to get involved in the research, to actively promote the Quell and Couth platforms that we have. User stories and peer-to-peer recommendations are really the way to get these kind of solutions out there and to help people talk about the problems and to help start to solve them. What we're really keen to do is early intervention is the key to this. RABI have traditionally been known as helping really much later down in the journey for people when their problems are often very tough, and we're really keen that we can start getting involved in this earlier on so that we can deal with some of these problems and help solve them earlier. Can I have the next slide, please? So as I said, we really need to take the stigma away from talking about mental health. We all have, at different times in our lives, we have different things to contend with and to deal with. And we need to make this much more commonplace, talking about looking after ourselves, our mental well-being and our physical well-being also. The next slide, please. So we hope you will support us. There was going to be, over the coming weeks, there'll be much more information available about the research in particular. We've also got lots of information available about Quell and Couth, and we encourage any conversations with any of you. We're really keen to work smarter and work better with everyone out there, and to just keep raising awareness for our work and also for the other organisations within the farming community, so that we can all work better together to support our community. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. As you can see, there's lots of little messages popping up in the chat here. I think one of your colleagues, Pam, is online as well, and she's been talking to us about it as well. So there's a number of us that are really interested in getting some more information about that and helping you with that. So we've got Jenny, who's on here. She works for RSPCA Assured. So she's interested in getting some information, being able to share it around. Obviously, we're interested here within Devon, Somerset and Torbay. We're out visiting farms and everything, so we'll be really happy to receive any information. And then Ellie's commented as well, about being able to share your message across Dorset as well. So we're looking at, hopefully with the people on board here, we can really share your message. And so thank you very much for giving up your time to have a chat and speak to us about it. It's really interesting. So thank you very much. I'm just trying to look back through and see if there are any questions for you specifically. Now, there aren't any there at the moment. Now, the plan is that we take a bit of a break for a second, and I hand over to my colleague Becky, who's going to introduce somebody who's going to spend some time singing to us. Becky, are you there?
Chris, I didn't know there was a comment from Ellie Sturrock. I just wondered if she's asking if you could do just have a brief chat. I think Ellie's a therapist and a sheep farmer at Dorset Steps to Wellbeing, and wondered whether she could just
brilliant. Okay, yes, yeah.
See a couple of minutes on. I think that sort of follows on from Jenny's presentation.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's fine. Sorry, I missed that in the chat. There's so many comments. I've missed that. So, Ellie, would you like to take a few moments, or?
Hi there. I don't know if you can see or hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
you, and I can see you now as well. Yeah.
Great. Okay, great. So yes, following on, it's really great to be part of this group. I'm going to be part of a meeting with people invested in the care of mental health of Dorset farmers tomorrow. I'm guessing some of those people might be here now, and we have a service which is very similar to the ones that Jenny, the GP, was talking about, that are talking therapy services. And it's really lovely to hear about RABI offering this online support. Well, we will do face-to-face work. We'll do work on the telephone with people. And we are here, we're designed to treat depression and anxiety for anybody that needs it. And it's free, it's an easy access service by trained professionals like the counsellors mentioned by RABI. And we also have trained cognitive behavioural therapists, and we offer mindfulness. So we offer all of the things that were previously mentioned. And the telephone number that you read out a little earlier is the number for anybody who's got a GP in Dorset. And if it would be of interest, I can happily do a session sometime on sleep. Sleep is a really key part to being well, to feeling okay. And I'm about to deliver a session, an hour-long session to NHS staff, actually. Poor sleep is a symptom of being worried, of having a low mood problem. And if you can get some control over that, then it can make things seem an awful lot better in the morning. So I'll be very happy to do that for anybody here and in farming communities in the southwest.
That's fantastic, Ellie. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. That's brilliant. So, Becky, over to you if you're happy to.
Oh yeah, thanks very much, Chris, and yeah, thank you to everyone that's spoken tonight, and thank you for everyone for attending. I'm just really here to introduce, well, a short while ago I was, well, a typically wet Somerset day, I had the pleasure of speaking to a Mrs. Sheldon on farm. We were talking about the difficulties this past year, in particular with coronavirus and lockdown. And Mrs. Sheldon happened to mention that at the beginning of lockdown, her husband Andrew had begun to record some songs, so that every evening people could tune into them to try and keep spirits up during this difficult year. Andrew is a hardworking sheep farmer during the day, and he's now known as a Somerset crooner at night. He started to video his songs at home whilst he was around the farm amongst the animals and whilst he was working. So I thought this was a really wonderful idea, and instantly thought, oh, we've got to help promote this, knowing how much music can bring everyone together. especially as perhaps some farmers that, you know, perhaps on their own, etc. It was a really nice idea. So hopefully this is going to work. I'd like you all to just take a moment just to listen and to watch Andrew. It would also be a good opportunity just to message in any questions you would like to ask either of Chris, Nikki, Sam and I, or as Trading Standards, or of any of our speakers. So it's an introduction from Andrew and a couple of songs just to give you a chance to have a listen and ask some questions. Oh, well, so you don't get that at every meeting, do you? But please check out Andrew, his Facebook page, which is Andrew Sheldon, the Somerset crooner. Thank you very much for listening to him.
Thank you very much. And if you can pass on our thanks to Andrew when you next speak to him or his wife, it would be very much appreciated. So thank you. So we've got a bit of a time now to ask any questions. Nothing has come through on the chat. So thanks very much, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you again in February at our next event with some different speakers, but again, something along the same lines.